The Harrow house was a place where silence had weight. It clung to the walls, soaked into the beams, pressed down on the chest of anyone who stepped inside. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. The boards creaked on their own, not from wind or shifting foundation, but as though unseen feet moved just out of sight. Mercy Harrow had grown used to it, though she never felt safe. At 12 she was small, slight, with thin wrists and tangled hair the color of burnt straw. Her belly bulged beneath a faded cotton dress, swollen with something she refused to call a baby. She often pressed her palm flat against it, not in affection but in fear, like a jailer ensuring the lock still held. The town of Fairhaven whispered about her, pregnant at 12, cursed, damned. Some claimed it was her cousin who had touched her, though no cousin had ever visited. Others muttered it was a punishment from God for the sins of her bloodline. Mercy said nothing, because the truth was worse. She remembered that night in flashes, her bedroom window open though she had latched it, the wind that smelled of ash and pine, a shadow crossing the floor with no body to cast it, cold hands pinning her down, a voice rasping in her ear, not words but something deeper, older, that vibrated her bones. She had woken slick with sweat, certain it had been a dream, but weeks later when her body began to change, she knew it had not been a dream. It had been a claiming. The Harrow family carried a history darker than the soil their house stood on. Mercy's grandmother Ada had hanged herself in the orchard. Her great-aunt Clara had vanished into the woods, her shoes left dangling from a branch, as if her body had been plucked straight out of them. Her sister Eliza, no one spoke of Eliza. The nursery door had been locked ever since the night she disappeared, her screams echoing through the house until they stopped all at once. Mercy was 6 at the time, and sometimes even now she pressed her ear to the door and swore she heard faint crying inside. Her mother had locked herself in her room months ago. The door stayed closed, the windows shuttered. Mercy left food at the threshold, but it was never taken. The air beneath the door carried a sickly sweet odor now, and flies gathered in clusters. Mercy didn't ask questions. She was afraid of the answers. Her father had left long before, vanishing into the woods one stormy night and never returning. Some said he ran, some said the woods took him. Mercy had stopped wondering. That left her alone in the house, with the thing inside her growing restless. At night it shifted violently, pressing sharp shapes against her skin. Sometimes she thought she saw fingers stretch beneath her belly, clawing for release. She whispered to it in the dark, not words of love but pleas. Stay inside. Don't come for me yet. The townsfolk kept their distance. They crossed the street when she passed. Children whispered, but their parents pulled them away. Once a girl her age named Ruth tried to be kind, leaving a ribbon at Mercy's gate. A week later, Ruth was found in the creek, her eyes scratched out, her body swaying in the current like a broken doll. No one left gifts after that, but Samuel did, the gravedigger's son, tall and gaunt, with eyes that lingered too long. He left bread, candles, once even a silver charm he claimed was dug from the oldest grave. When Mercy confronted him, asking why he came when others stayed away, he only said, "Because I've seen it too. The thing in the woods, the thing that wears faces." She didn't want to believe him, but then one night, she saw Eliza. It was raining, and Mercy woke to tapping at her window. She pushed the curtain aside and saw her sister standing barefoot in the yard, her white nightgown soaked, her hair plastered to her face. Eliza smiled, lifted her hand and beckoned. Mercy gasped and ran to the door, flinging it open, but the yard was empty. Only the rain, only the dark, yet her belly shifted sharply, violently, as if whatever was inside had recognized Eliza and wanted her. The nursery door rattled that night. Mercy heard it from her bed, a steady pounding, like a small hand striking from the inside. She buried her head beneath the quilt, tears soaking her pillow, and prayed to a God who had long since abandoned the Harrows. The scratching began soon after. From the walls at first, slow and deliberate, then under the floorboards, behind the headboard. Mercy stuffed rags in her ears, but the sound grew sharper, until she swore it was inside her skull. One afternoon Samuel came to her with dirt under his nails and fear in his eyes. He dragged her to the cemetery, past leaning stones and cracked angels, to the farthest corner where moss smothered the names. He dug until his hands bled. Mercy wanted to leave, but something compelled her to stay, as though the earth itself demanded her witness. At last his spade struck wood. They pried open the rotted coffin lid, expecting bones. Instead they found journals, dozens of them, wrapped in oilcloth, dry despite the damp. Ada Harrow's journals. The handwriting inside was jagged, frantic. Pages spoke of bargains made in the woods, of a faceless figure who promised survival if the Harrow women offered their daughters, one each generation, chosen, carrying not a child, but a vessel. Ada wrote of her own torment, of something inside her that whispered at night, of her body splitting as it clawed to be born, of the cradle, rocking in the nursery, though no baby had lived. Her final entry was a scrawl. "It will not stop, not ever. It is already inside me." Mercy dropped the book, her hands shaking. Samuel's lantern flickered, shadows bending wrong across the stones. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw figures moving between them, watching. She knew then. The curse was not rumor, not punishment. It was inheritance, and now it lived in her. Mercy couldn't sleep after reading Ada's words. The journals sat on her dresser, wrapped in a torn bedsheet, but even hidden, they whispered. When the candle burned low, she swore she saw the pages ripple, as if something beneath them stirred. Her belly was worse now. The thing inside shifted constantly, never still, as though impatient. Sometimes she felt sharp points against her ribs, and once she woke screaming, when a claw-like shape pressed so hard against her skin that it bruised. Samuel stayed close. He was the only one brave or foolish enough to remain. He brought her food when her strength failed, and sat with her when the house grew too quiet. He asked her to leave the Harrow land, begged her to flee. "It's not just you," he said one night, his thin hands trembling. "It's this place. I've seen the woods move. I've seen something walking in them that wasn't a man." Mercy shook her head. "It won't matter where I go. It's in me. I'll carry it with me." The house agreed. Doors opened on their own. Windows slammed shut when she tried to air out the rot. The nursery door pounded every night now, as if a small fist hammered from the other side. Sometimes she heard voices through the wood. Her grandmother, her sister, even her father. They all called her name, begging her to let them out. She stopped going upstairs altogether. She slept in the kitchen, her cot pushed against the door, as though she could keep the rest of the house at bay. But the house was alive. The rafters groaned like voices muttering above her. The walls bled dark resin, sticky and sour, and when she scraped it away, her hands shook for hours afterward. One morning, Samuel found her pale and shivering, staring into the cracked mirror above the sink. She had touched her belly and seen something looking back at her from inside her reflection. Not her, not a child. Something with eyes too wide and a mouth stretched in a grin that showed too many teeth. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't let it come out." Samuel gripped her shoulders. His eyes were sunken but steady. "Then we stop it. We end it before it's born. But how do you end something that isn't human?" That night, they tried. Samuel stole a knife from the butcher's shop and pressed it into Mercy's hand. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the blade to her skin, to the stretched and straining flesh of her belly, but the steel dulled as it touched her. The edge that had been sharp enough to cut through bone skated harmlessly across her skin, leaving only a shallow scratch. The house groaned. The nursery door banged open, though it had been locked for years. From upstairs they heard a baby crying, thin, high, piercing. But no child lived in the house. Samuel dragged Mercy outside, into the yard, into the orchard where the twisted trees still bore the rope Ada had swung from. The night air was sharp with frost, their breath clouding. And there, among the bare branches, they saw them, figures, dozens of them, half seen in the dark. Women in nightgowns, their faces slack, their feet bare. Men with ropes digging into their necks, eyes bulging, mouths frozen mid-scream. Children with hollow eyes and blackened hands. They stood between the trees, watching, silent, waiting. Mercy clutched Samuel's arm so tightly he winced, but he didn't move. "They're not alive," she whispered. "No," he said. "They're yours. They're Harrow's." The figures swayed gently, as though rocked by a wind Mercy couldn't feel. Then in unison they turned their heads toward the woods. Samuel's breath caught. "Do you see it?" At first she didn't. The shadows between the trees were thick, the kind that swallowed moonlight whole. But then it stepped forward, tall, too tall, a body stretched long and thin, faceless, with only a smooth plane of skin where features should be. Its arms dangled to the ground, fingers dragging like roots, and yet it moved with purpose, each step deliberate, heavy. The faceless head tilted as it regarded them, though how it saw she couldn't imagine. Mercy's belly twisted sharply, painfully. The thing inside her kicked hard enough that she doubled over, and from the woods, though no mouth moved, came a voice that rattled her bones. "Mother," she screamed, and Samuel dragged her back inside, slamming the door shut. But the sound carried through the walls, through the floor, through her body. The baby crying upstairs turned to laughter. After that night, Mercy stopped leaving the house. The woods pulsed with something alive, something that waited for her. Samuel returned less often, his own father threatening to chain him if he didn't stay away from the cursed girl. But he still came when he could, always pale, always desperate. "It wants to be born," he told her, "and it won't wait much longer." She knew. Her body ached constantly, her skin stretched until it tore in places, blood soaking her dress. At times she saw the shapes of fingers pressing outward, scraping against her from inside. She screamed until her throat bled, but nothing eased it. One evening, Samuel carried her upstairs despite her protests. He forced open the nursery door, the hinges shrieking. Inside, the air was thick with rot and lavender. The cradle stood in the corner, covered in cobwebs, but it rocked gently, as though soothed by unseen hands. Mercy sobbed,
"Please, not here. This is where it ends," Samuel said. But when they stepped closer, the cradle stilled, and inside lay not dust, not emptiness, but a bundle of cloth, small and shifting. From it came a faint laugh, high and cruel. Mercy staggered back, clutching her stomach. The bundle squirmed, the cloth slipping away. Pale fingers curled outward. A grin flashed in the dark. The room erupted in screams. Not hers, not Samuel's, but dozens, all at once. Eliza's voice, her grandmother's, her mother's, all howling from nowhere and everywhere. The floorboards buckled, the cradle toppled, spilling nothing onto the ground, and yet something unseen crawled across the boards, dragging itself toward Mercy. She stumbled, clutching her belly, her skin splitting open as something inside clawed to be free. Samuel grabbed her, shouting her name, but the voices drowned him out, a chorus of the dead, of the damned. The faceless figure stood in the corner, taller than the ceiling, its head bent low. It reached one long hand toward Mercy, and the thing inside her whispered again, "Let me out." The faceless thing in the nursery bent until its smooth head almost touched the floor, one arm stretching toward Mercy as if it meant to dip its fingers into her and scoop something out. The air pressed in, the wallpaper puckered. The cradle creaked with a soft, steady rhythm, though neither Mercy nor Samuel had touched it. "Back," Samuel said, though his voice was barely there. He dragged Mercy behind him and fumbled the pouch he kept in his coat. Rock salt spilled over his shaking fingers. He traced a rough circle on the nursery floor, the grains ticking like tiny bones. "Step in." Mercy staggered into the circle. Pain folded her in half, low and ripping, then let go, then returned worse. Her dress clung to her thighs, wet and warm, and the smell that came with it wasn't human. Pine tar and iron, lavender rotted in a jar. The faceless thing tilted its head. Its fingers dragged through the salt line without disturbing a single grain. It could reach the circle couldn't reach it. Samuel stared, and something in him shifted from faith to practical terror. Different circle, he whispered to himself, to Ada, to the dead. Different rules. He tore his coat lining and knotted the strip into 9 tight knots, the way his father had taught him to stop a bleeding pipe. He laid the strip around Mercy's feet. "Don't step off." She couldn't have if she tried. Another contraction rose and dragged a scream out of her. The sound ricocheted down the hall and set the house to answering. Doors thudded. The grandfather clock ticked without hands, a hollow heartbeat. From the closed bedroom down the corridor, the sewn mouth of Mercy's mother hummed a lullaby that squeezed the air into a narrow throat. Samuel yanked one of Ada's journals from his sack and flipped through pages that were damp though no water touched them. The words shivered and slid. He forced them still. Bargain made. Daughter taken. Vessel carried. To spare the line, one is chosen. The gate opens with breath and blood. To sever, speak what is hidden. Cut what is borrowed. "What does that mean?" he asked aloud, though Mercy couldn't hear him over the pain. He looked up. Every picture on the nursery wall had turned to face the corner, frames twisted toward the plaster, as if too ashamed to watch. Mercy grabbed his wrist. "Don't leave me." "I won't." He lied without intending to. The contraction broke her like a wave. Something inside her pushed hard enough to shatter a thought. She plunged both hands under her belly, as if she could hold the thing back, as if fingers and fear could be a door. "It's wrong," she gasped. "It wants my breath." The faceless reached again, not for her, but past her toward the crib. Its long fingers plucked the air where a canopy would have hung years ago. Invisible thread glittered for a second, catching candlelight, a fine black line that ran from the corner of the crib to the center of Mercy's body. The line tightened, humming. Samuel saw it then, and the seeing broke whatever childhood remained in him. The crib wasn't empty. The empty was the crib. The cord that should have connected Mercy to a child connected her to a room, to wood, to something rooted. He fished out the dull butcher's knife. The blade was useless against Mercy's skin, but maybe it could cut thread. He swung. Metal rang as if he'd struck an iron gate. The thread thrummed, brighter, and the pain in Mercy went white. "Not iron," Samuel panted. He dug in his sack again, knuckles banging against glass, bone, string, things he'd stolen from sheds and graves because he didn't know what would work. His fingers found the silver charm he'd given Mercy months ago, dug up from a grave that predated the town. A coin hammered thin and soft, stamped with a circle eaten by teeth. He pressed it against the black line. The coin sizzled. The line pulled away and sank deeper into Mercy's belly with needle hunger. She arched, mouth open, soundless. Her eyes rolled white. "It knows my name," she rasped when the air returned. Not Mercy, the other one. Eliza had a second name. The thought came from nowhere, or maybe from Ada, or from the orchard rope. "Did your mother name you twice?" Mercy shook her head, teeth chattering. She wouldn't say. Said names are doors. Samuel slapped the journal open again. To sever, speak what is hidden. Names. Not the names on stones that rain had washed blank. Not the ones the preacher stitched into God's book. The names you didn't say in case something heard and answered. Another contraction seized her. This one didn't crest and fall. It rose and rose, a drawn-out tearing. A wet flood broke across her thighs. It wasn't clear. It was dark, thick, threaded with a pale film that clung to her knees and the floor like spider silk. It smelled like a root cellar full of drowned candles. "Now," Samuel said, as if time obeyed him. "It's now." He left the circle. Mercy's fingers clawed for him and closed on air. The faceless unfurled taller but did not strike. Perhaps it didn't need to. It only had to wait for the door to open. Samuel ran down the hall, past the humming corpse, down the stairs that flexed as if the house breathed with his feet. He burst into the yard. The orchard was black geometry, branches crossed like tally marks. The rope on Ada's tree swung though there was no wind. In the dirt at the roots, something pale jutted, a knuckle of bone or wood. He dug with his hands until nails peeled and blood slicked the soil. He pulled out a root shaped like a hooked blade, hard and smooth and stained with old smoked sap. Ada's journal had a line that he hadn't understood until now. Cut not the cord, but the false root. The gate's root is the house. He ran back. The stairs stuttered under him, elongating, shortening, as if he were moving through the throat of something alive. The nursery door had become narrower, and the distance between it and his hand stretched like taffy. He pushed anyway. The room snapped into place, and he stumbled inside. Mercy knelt now, not by choice, her body forced into a posture older than the house. The black thread from the crib dug into her belly, and when Samuel looked closer, he saw it split into many, a web anchored to corners, to the ceiling, to the faceless thing's wrist. The threads pulsed with her pulse. "Say it," Samuel said, breath ragged. "Say the hidden thing." Mercy squeezed the knotted strip under her feet so hard the fabric squealed. Blood slicked her calves. Eliza's second name was held back. Grandmother took it at baptism. Ada. She said the name like a door pounding open. Ada Mercy Harrow. The walls rippled. The black thread shivered. The faceless inclined its head as if acknowledging an etiquette. The cradle stopped rocking. "Yours," Samuel urged. "What was whispered into your hair and never spoken after?" Mercy's eyes flooded with terror so clean it looked like recognition. "It wasn't mine," she croaked. "It was promised. They never gave me a second. They left me empty so the house could name me." The next contraction threw her forward. Something slid into Samuel's hands, slick and cold, a shape that was too long and too light. He didn't look. He couldn't. He only felt the weight and the wrong of it, how it moved like a handful of snakes braided together. The umbilical wasn't flesh. It was shadow tightened into cord, braided with fine hair and filament. It led not to Mercy's body, but through her, through the floor, into the joists, down the posts, into the earth, into the foundation stones that had been quarried from the cold creek. The house fed it. Or it fed the house. Samuel jammed the root blade under the cord. The blade hissed as if dipped in lye. He remembered Ada's line, "Cut what is borrowed." He spoke the only hidden word that felt right because it tasted wrong. Home. The root blade bit. The thread shrieked without sound. Mercy's scream filled it. The cord tensed against the blade like a muscle, and then gave, a single thick fiber parting with a noise like a sigh, and a scrape and a grave opening. Everything went still. Even Mercy's crying ran out. For one breath length, the faceless felt smaller. It backed a step, hands loosened. The nursery brightened by the width of a fingernail. Then the floor heaved. The cut end of the cord didn't recoil. It spilled. Shadow welled from the severed place, and fell like liquid night, pooling around Mercy's knees, soaking the salt, drinking the knots, swallowing the silver coin. It smelled of the well when it turned black every spring. The thing in Samuel's hands flexed. It was not heavy because it didn't belong to weight. Cold coiled around his wrists. He almost dropped it, but it clung, fingers, hooks, and pulled itself up his forearms like a child climbing a ladder. He finally looked. Its face was almost a face. Not the gaping socket eyes he would learn to dread. Not yet. 2 shallow pits. A slit that thought about being a mouth, then changed its mind. The skin was the pail of candles kept too long in a drawer. "Don't," Mercy said, but the word had no muscle. The newborn, if that was a word for it, turned toward the faceless as a magnet finds north. The longer thing lifted its arms for a transfer, and Samuel, on instinct older than prayer, stepped back. "No," he said, shocking himself with how firm it was. "No." The faceless did not move. It didn't need to. Black filaments slipped from its wrists and shoulders and hips, the way ivy finds mortar lines. They reached for Samuel's elbows, his throat, the place between his ribs. His skin crawled away from them but had nowhere to go. Samuel clenched the root blade in his teeth, spat, caught it again, and slashed at the air. The knife cut what should not have been cuttable. The filaments recoiled, snapping like harp strings. The newborn laughed. It was small and delighted and awful, a laugh like Mercy's used to be before the house learned her. "Samuel," Mercy said, a flat thread with no breath behind it. Listen. He did, and he wished he hadn't. Under the newborn's laugh, under the house's breath, another sound worked its way up from the timbers, the creak and hum of many chairs being dragged across the floor, though no chairs moved. The dead were taking seats. The room had become a church. Ada's journal slid off the dresser and fell open on its own. A page turned as if licked by a tongue. Severing is not salvation. The cut makes a gate of the mother. The first breath taken by the vessel opens the way. Samuel stopped breathing with his mouth and tried with his eyes. Mercy's body shuddered. The newborn's chest fluttered. It opened the non-mouth and drew in air that the room didn't have to spare. "Don't let it," Mercy said, and the plea was older than language. Samuel did the only thing that felt like an answer. He brought the newborn to his own chest, pressed its knot face into his shirt, and crushed it against his sternum. Not to kill, he didn't know if you could, but to steal its first breath. "Me," he whispered. "Take me." The faceless paused. The black threads hung, uncertain. The house listened. The newborn's non-mouth opened against Samuel's skin, cold pierced. Breath moved that wasn't his. Something old and hungry tasted the hollow behind his heart. The grandfather clock in the parlor ticked once. Mercy said his name like it was the last thing she owned. The newborn breathed its first breath. Through him, through the cut gate he wasn't meant to be. The room split and kept standing. The orchard pushed its roots up through the floorboards. The faceless lifted its head as if smelling rain. The cradle began to rock again, softly, soothing itself for what came next. Samuel felt the newborn's breath seep into him, colder than any winter air. It slid beneath his skin, into the hollows of his bones, and for an instant he couldn't tell where he ended, and it began. His chest spasmed, and the thing pressed against him laughed again, soft and delighted. The faceless figure tilted its head, as though satisfied that the ritual had been completed. Mercy dragged herself up, blood streaking her thighs, hair matted to her face. Her eyes were hollow pits of exhaustion, yet she still found her voice. "Samuel, don't give it to them, don't let it take you." He couldn't answer. His jaw locked, his lungs moving with a rhythm that wasn't his own. The newborn's shadowy cord pulsed against his sternum, feeding, binding. Around them, the nursery walls buckled inward, as if the entire house leaned closer to witness. The faceless stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Each movement stretched the air taut, and with every step, more of the dead appeared in the room. Ada, Clara, Eliza, women with open mouths and men with ropes around their throats. They lined the walls, watching in silence. Mercy's mother joined them, her sewn lips leaking black threads that wove into the wallpaper. Samuel wrenched the root blade up, pressing it against the newborn's shifting spine. It squirmed but clung tighter, its laughter rising in pitch until it was almost a scream. "Take me, not her," Samuel gasped through clenched teeth. "If you need a gate, take me." The faceless figure extended its hand. Samuel knew it was waiting. Not demanding, just expecting. A bargain older than language, older than breath itself. Mercy, shaking, crawled toward Samuel. "Don't. That's what it wants. It doesn't want a mother. It wants a door. It'll take you, and then it will come for me anyway." Her belly was flat now, emptied, but the skin twitched as though something still lingered inside. Samuel looked at her, then at the newborn. Its half face pressed closer, its pits for eyes gazing into him like mirrors that didn't reflect. He thought of Ruth in the creek, of the townsfolk watching from afar, of the way the soil in Fairhaven never grew right. All of it, every curse, every whisper, rooted in this. If he gave himself over, maybe it would stop. Maybe it would end here. But Ada's journal still lay open, its last page fluttering. Severing is not salvation. The cut makes a gate. The first breath opens the way. Samuel's breath hitched. The newborn had already breathed through him. He was already the gate. The faceless stepped closer, its fingers stretched, long enough to touch his shoulder. "No," Mercy croaked, dragging herself forward. "No more Harrows, no more gates." She grabbed the root blade from his hand and drove it into the floor, deep into the foundation wood. The house screamed. Not creaked, not groaned, screamed. Splinters erupted like shrapnel. The cradle toppled, shattering. The dead figures howled as their bodies burst into smoke. The newborn shrieked in Samuel's arms, twisting violently. Its laughter broke into fury. It bit into his chest with teeth that hadn't been there before. He screamed, blood spraying, but he held it tighter, crushing it against him. "Burn it," he gasped. Mercy looked at him wild-eyed. "How?" "The house," he coughed. "It's the womb. Burn the womb." She staggered to the toppled lantern, flames licking at the oil that had spilled across the boards. With shaking hands she tipped it. Fire raced across the wood, leaping to curtains, climbing the walls. The nursery filled with smoke, with heat, with shrieks that weren't human. The faceless recoiled, its smooth head tilting back as the flames reached it. Its body twisted, melting into the shadows, retreating into the corners of the room. But it didn't vanish. It waited. It watched. Samuel collapsed, the newborn thrashing against him. He forced it tighter against his chest, even as its teeth ripped into him. "Go," he shouted at Mercy, his voice ragged and breaking. "Run." She shook her head. Tears streaked her soot-stained cheeks. "I won't leave you. You have to." His eyes locked on hers, fierce, desperate. "If it takes me, let it. But you end it. Don't let it follow." The fire roared higher, swallowing the nursery. The roof cracked, beams collapsing. Mercy crawled to the window, dragging her broken body through the smoke. She turned back once, just once, and saw Samuel on his knees, clutching the newborn as the flames consumed him. His face was lit in orange and black, his scream lost in the inferno. She fell into the yard, rolling across the frozen ground as the Harrow house burned. The townsfolk gathered at a distance, watching the fire devour the cursed property. None dared move closer. None dared help. Mercy opened her eyes in the darkness of the barn where they had laid her. Her belly twitched once, sharply, though it was empty. She pressed her hand against it, trembling. From inside, faint but undeniable, came a single word: "Mother."